let's start in on the so-called myths of the Anglo-Saxons. It is widely supposed that the Anglo-Saxon is king in America, right?
Yes.
Now, in what sense do you disprove this?
Well, in terms just of sheer numbers, that Anglo-Saxons are about 15% of the population. So the notion of speaking of an Anglo-Saxon majority and then the various minorities around them seems a little ludicrous when you call 15% a majority and you call 13 or 12% a minority. In terms of income, Anglo-Saxons have about 5 or 6% higher incomes than the national average. But there are other groups such as the Chinese who have 12% higher, and Japanese who have 32% higher, and Jews are higher than that. So that the notion that the Anglo-Saxons are remarkable is not borne out by the data. If I limit my description just to families that are female-headed, and I compare blacks and whites, then within that comparison, I see that the blacks are falling further and further behind. Yet if I pick almost any measure of more advantaged families, I find the blacks not only catching up, but in some cases overtaking and passing the whites. And there are a number of ways you can look at it and you get the same result. And what that suggests to me is that those blacks who have the skills, the experience, the education, and so on, are finding things much, much easier than ever before. It would be cultural primarily, at least in my judgment. Now, there are those who would attribute it to genetics. I had an argument with someone like that last week. The great problem is these things go so much together that taking the black population in the Western Hemisphere, those blacks who have a higher percentage of white ancestry have had enormous social advantages historically. In the United States, when there was slavery, the overwhelming bulk of the slaves were black, but 37% of the free blacks were in fact mulattoes, which is in the American definition half white or more. In Latin America, there are countries in which more than half of all the free blacks were in fact mulattoes, and in which the great majority of the slaves were black.
And advantages inured to them? Advantages inured?
Oh, absolutely, enormously. Well, freedom alone would be one big advantage. Freedom alone would be one big advantage. Freedom alone would be one big advantage. But even under slavery itself, there were distinctions made between the mulattoes and the blacks. The mulattoes being very often the offspring either of the slave owner or of the overseer, and therefore getting preferential treatment. And so throughout the Western Hemisphere, those people who have higher white ancestry among the black population have been economically, educationally, and otherwise more advanced. And in times past, it was quite common for them to attribute their success to genetics, when in fact there were fairly blatant historical differences. But the question is, how would you then separate out the two things, since they always occur together?